If the government promised your family food, then used hunger to force you off your land, would you still call it a treaty? In the winter of the northern plains, the paper looked clean. The words sounded peaceful. But the wagons arrived light, and then they stopped coming. Outside an agency fence, children learned what it means when a promise has fine print and a rifle behind it. This is the story of a leader who signs to save his people, only to discover the agreement was never meant to be kept. And when the corridor narrows into fences, patrols, and counting books, he makes one last choice: not to win a battle, but to hide a future. Stay to the end, because what he buries under a cottonwood isn't treasure. It's survival. Chapter 1. The Treaty. Winter. The first snow came late, like a reluctant guest. It sifted down from a sky the color of cold ash and laid itself in thin sheets along the river's bends, clinging to reeds and half-frozen mud. Where the cottonwoods leaned, their bare branches caught the flakes and held them for a breath before letting them fall again, silent as feathers. The people of the Willow River had already moved their lodges closer together. Smoke rose from them in steady, narrow columns that bent with the wind and then disappeared. From a distance, the camp looked like a handful of coals carried carefully across a white plain. Stone Who Listens stood at the edge of it and watched the river work its way through the ice. He had not always been called that. In his youth, when he ran with the hunters and his ribs showed through his skin from too many miles and too little meat, they called him Fast Shadow. Later, after his first winter of leadership, after the fever took his father and the council's eyes turned toward him, he became Stone Who Listens, because he spoke less than other men and heard what the wind said when it slid through grass. He heard what a child did not say when she came too quietly to the fire. He heard the pause in an elder's sentence, where pride sat like a stone on the tongue. Now he listened to the river's grinding, the soft crack of ice plates shifting against one another, and he tried to hear the shape of the winter to come. Behind him, the camp stirred with the small sounds of survival. Wood splitting, a woman's cough, a baby's thin cry that ended in a gasp and then began again. A dog barked and another answered. Somewhere a drum tapped quietly, not for ceremony, but for keeping a rhythm while hands worked. Footsteps pressed into the snow. Stone Who Listens did not turn at once. He knew those steps. Light but steady. Careful where the ground might hide a root. "It will seal by the next moon," said his sister, Blue Reed, coming to stand beside him. She was wrapped in a robe that had been mended so many times it looked like a map, patches of hide and cloth stitched over older scars. Stone Who Listens breathed out. The air turned to frost. "It should have sealed earlier," he said. Blue Reed's gaze remained on the water. It listened to the summer longer than we did. He almost smiled, then stopped. Smiles were costly now. They demanded a softness he could not afford. Behind them, a boy ran past, carrying a bundle of dried willow bark. His feet kicked up powder. His laughter had the bright edge of hunger in it, as if he did not know yet that hunger could turn laughter into anger. Blue Reed watched him go. "They are still children," she said quietly, "even when we pretend they are not." Stone Who Listens felt the words settle into him. Pretending was what leaders did when the world tried to make children into numbers, counted mouths, counted feet, counted hands for war. "When does the council gather?" he asked. "At dusk," Blue Reed replied. They are already arguing in their heads." Stone, who listens, nodded. Dusk came early now. It arrived like a door closing. They stood a moment longer, listening to the river and the far-off crows calling from somewhere beyond sight. Then he turned back toward the heart of the camp. The Willow River people called themselves by a name that meant those who keep the bends, because their lives curved around water. Outsiders said other names, names that tasted wrong. Traders wrote them down as if a people could be reduced to ink strokes, and soldiers spoke of them the way men spoke of weather, as something to be endured or driven off. At the center of camp, the council lodge had been made larger than the others. Its poles rose like a small grove, tied together with rawhide, covered with hides and canvas scavenged from trade. A fire burned inside. Smoke slipped out from the top in a thin ribbon and then flattened in the wind. Stone, who listens, ducked through the flap. The heat struck his face. It did not comfort him. Heat could be stolen, it could be smothered, it could burn your own hands. Around the fire sat the elders, the hunt leaders, the women whose voices carried weight because they fed the camp with more than meat, and the men who had returned from watching the settlers' road. Their faces were lined not only by age, but by recent strain, the kind that came from choosing between bad paths. Old Elk sat closest to the fire, his knees drawn up, his hands resting on a walking stick, polished smooth by years. His eyes were pale and sharp. Beside him sat Cottonmouth, a woman with hair streaked white, her chin lifted like she was tasting every word before it was spoken. Across from them were the younger men, Raven Coyle, who wanted to fight because his brother had been shot near the timberline, and Red Clay, who had lived for a time among the traders and spoke English with a hard, practiced mouth. Stone, who listens, sat where the leader sat, not on a raised platform, not above anyone, but at the place where every gaze could find him. Leadership here was not a throne. It was a fire you had to keep lit even when the wood was wet. No one spoke for a moment. In their silence was a kind of respect, and also a kind of accusation. You are here now, so decide. Old Elk's voice broke the quiet. The hunters returned. Stone, who listens, looked toward the entrance. Two men came in, snow on their shoulders, faces raw with wind. One carried a small bundle. When he set it down and opened it, everyone leaned forward. Inside was a strip of dried meat, tough and dark. It was not much. It was also the kind of offering that held more meaning than calories. It said, "This is what we can find." "The deer have moved," the hunter said. His voice was hoarse. "The elk, too." The tracks go north and east, toward the hills the soldiers watch. Red Clay's jaw tightened. "They watch the hills now, do they?" The hunter nodded. "We saw their smoke, and we saw the fence." "A fence!" Raven Coyle spat. "They fence the world as if it is a pen for their animals." Cottonmouth lifted a hand, and Raven Coyle's anger quieted, not extinguished, but contained. Old Elk looked at Stone, who listens. We cannot follow, not without blood. Stone, who listens, felt the familiar weight in his chest, like a stone that someone had placed there and then forgotten to remove. He had carried it for months. Each new report made it heavier. "What of the winter stores?" he asked, though he already knew. Blue Reed, who had entered behind him, answered instead. "We have enough for 2 moons if we ration, maybe 3 if the children do not get sick." Cottonmouth's eyes narrowed. Children always get sick in winter. A murmur moved around the circle. Someone coughed. The fire crackled. Red Clay leaned forward. The agent promised supplies. He said if we sign, if we agree to settle where they tell us, we will receive flour and salt pork, blankets, tools. Raven Coil's laugh was short and sharp. Salt pork, he repeated, as if the words were an insult. Old Elk's gaze did not shift from Stone Who Listens. And if we do not sign? Red Clay's mouth tightened. Then the agent says we will be treated as hostile. Hostile, Cottonmouth echoed, tasting the word. As if the river itself is hostile when it floods. Stone Who Listens listened to them, but behind their words he heard the deeper question. Will you trade land for time? He had met the agent once in late summer, when the grass was high and the mosquitoes rose in clouds. The agent's name was Mr. Hollis. He had a thin face and clean boots that never seemed to touch mud. He had arrived with 2 soldiers and a wagon full of paper. Paper was a strange kind of weapon. It did not cut skin. It cut the future. Mr. Hollis had spoken with a polite voice, like a man asking for sugar from a neighbor, and he had unrolled maps on a crate. Maps showed lines that did not exist on the ground. He had pointed to a square and said, "Here, this is where you will reside. It is set aside for you." Set aside, as if the land was a pot on a shelf. Stone Who Listens had asked, "What of the river bends?" Mr. Hollis had smiled as if indulging a child. "Those lands are now designated for settlement. It's progress. But you will be protected, and you will be provided for. There will be rations through the winter, as stipulated." Stipulated. Another word like a nail. At the time, Stone Who Listens had not answered yes or no. He had said, "We will speak with our counsel." Mr. Hollis had nodded and offered his hand. Stone Who Listens had not taken it. He had seen hands like that before, hands that shook yours and then wrote your name down as if they owned it. Now, in the council lodge, winter pressed against the hide walls, and the choice had teeth. Old Elk spoke again, his voice steady. "In my youth, when the first traders came, we thought we could take their iron and keep our songs. We thought their hunger would stop when they had eaten their fill, but their hunger is a fire that grows when fed." Raven Coil's eyes flashed. "Then we starve them. We push them back." Cottonmouth's gaze cut to him. "And with what? With arrows against rifles? With boys who still have milk on their breath?" Raven Coil's hands clenched. "With courage. Courage is not food," Cottonmouth said. Silence again. Stone Who Listens felt the eyes on him, waiting for him to carry their fear. He looked around the circle, seeing not only leaders, but the faces of grief. Each person here had lost someone in the last 2 years, to sickness brought by outsiders, to bullets near the timber, to whiskey that traders sold like poison wrapped in sweetness. He saw Blue Reed's left hand, the scar on her palm from the time she grabbed a hot stone from the fire when she was distracted by bad news. He thought of the children. He thought of the old ones. He thought of the river. "We will send a delegation," he said at last. The words felt like stepping onto ice, testing if it would hold. "We will hear their terms again. We will see if the supplies are real." Raven Coil's mouth opened in protest, but Old Elk lifted a hand. Even he, stubborn as an old tree, did not argue, because he knew winter did not negotiate. Cottonmouth's voice softened. "And if it is another lie?" Stone Who Listens looked into the fire. Flames curled around a stick and turned it into glowing bone. "Then we will have learned," he said, "and we will decide with that knowledge." Red Clay nodded quickly, relieved. He had lived among outsiders long enough to believe in the power of talking. Or perhaps he believed in the power of delay. Blue Reed watched Stone Who Listens, her eyes steady. In them he saw a question she did not speak. "Are you trading our dignity for flour?" He could not answer that yet, not even to himself. The delegation was chosen before the fire burned down. Stone Who Listens would go because a leader who sent others to carry his risk was no leader. Red Clay would go because he could speak English and because he understood the way outsiders thought in straight lines. Blue Reed insisted on coming too, not because women were forbidden from such things, they were not, but because she had a reputation among the settlers for being calm, and calm sometimes disarmed men who expected rage. Old Elk would remain with the camp to keep the council together. Cottonmouth would oversee rationing in the sick lodge. Raven Coil would take a small party to scout the hills again, to watch the soldiers and count their number. When the meeting ended, Stone Who Listens stepped out into the cold. Night had come while they spoke. The sky was clear and full of stars, sharp as chips of ice. The moon hung low, a pale coin. He walked through the camp. People looked up when he passed. Some nodded. Some looked away. A woman rocked a child near a fire, humming a tune that had been sung here for generations. The child's eyes were too large in his thin face. Stone Who Listens paused and crouched near the woman. She did not stop humming. She looked at him with a tired kind of respect. "How is he?" Stone Who Listens asked. "He eats," she said, "but he is always hungry." Stone Who Listens reached into the pouch at his belt and pulled out a small piece of dried meat, one of the last from the hunter's bundle. He placed it in the woman's hand without ceremony. She stared at it, then at him. "For him," he said, and stood. As he walked away, he heard her humming change, the melody shifting as if the song had swallowed a stone. At his own lodge, he found Blue Reed waiting. She sat cross-legged near a small fire, her hands busy with stitching a tear in a robe. Her needle moved like a bird's beak. "You gave away food again," she said without looking up. He sat opposite her. "He is a child." "He is not the only child," she replied. Stone Who Listens stared at the fire. "If I cannot feed one child, how will I feed them all?" Blue Reed's needle paused. "You will sign," she said, not as a question. Stone Who Listens did not answer immediately. Outside, the wind ran its fingers along the lodge covering, making it whisper. "I will listen," he said finally. Blue Reed's eyes lifted to his. They were dark and steady. "Listening is not the same as believing." He nodded. "I know." Blue Reed returned to her stitching. "Do you remember the winter when Father killed the last deer and gave it to old woman Juniper because she had no teeth?" Stone Who Listens remembered. He remembered the taste of broth made from bones, thin and bitter. He remembered the way his father's eyes had not apologized. "Yes," he said. Blue Reed's voice was quiet. He did not call it strategy. He called it being human. Stone Who Listens felt the stone in his chest shift. Being human does not keep soldiers from closing their fences. "No," Blue Reed agreed, "but it keeps us from becoming them." He looked at her then, truly looked. In the firelight, her face carried both youth and age, as if hardship had layered years on her bones. She had chosen to come with him to the agency, not because she trusted it, but because she did not trust him to go alone. "Sleep," she said. We leave before the sun. Stone Who Listens lay down on his sleeping hide, but sleep did not come easily. His mind walked in circles like a wolf with a trap on its leg. Each thought returned to the same point. Winter, children, paper. He dreamed of the river. In the dream, it ran under ice that was too thin. He stepped onto it and felt it crack. Beneath the ice, shadows moved, fish, logs, something larger. He could not tell if it was the river's spirit or a creature that fed on the bones of the drowned. He woke before dawn, his breath white in the lodge. Blue Reed was already up, her hair braided, her eyes alert. Red Clay arrived soon after, carrying a small bundle, food for the journey, meager but carefully chosen. He looked nervous, shifting his weight as if he stood on hot coals. "The road is watched," Red Clay said quietly. "Raven Coil saw soldiers near the ridge last night. They have a small camp." Stone Who Listens nodded. "We will go anyway." Red Clay swallowed. "They might not let us pass." Blue Reed's mouth tightened. "They will," she said. "They like to watch us bow." Stone Who Listens touched her arm gently, a warning not to let anger lead her tongue. Anger was a spark. In the wrong place, it started fires you couldn't control. They left the camp as the sky began to pale, a thin strip of light at the horizon. Behind them, smoke rose from lodges. Ahead, the land stretched white and hard. Their footprints cut into snow like writing. As they walked, Stone Who Listens kept his senses open. He listened for horses, for the metallic clink of gear, for the unnatural silence that sometimes came before danger. The world was quieter in winter, but not safer. They followed a trail that wound through stands of pine and over low ridges. The snow grew deeper in shaded places, and their legs ached from lifting through it. Red Clay spoke sometimes, trying to fill the quiet with information. "Mr. Hollis is under pressure," he said. "The settlers want more land. They say it is theirs by right. The army wants peace, but not the kind we mean. Their peace is our disappearance." Blue Reed glanced at him. "You speak as if you admire them." Red Clay's face tightened. "I do not admire, I understand. If we do not understand, we die." Stone Who Listens did not intervene. He knew both were right in different ways. Understanding did not guarantee survival, but ignorance guaranteed loss. By midday, they reached the ridge Raven Coil had spoken of. From there, they could see the road, a thin scar through the snow, packed down by wagon wheels. In the distance, smoke rose from a cluster of buildings, the agency. Between the ridge and the road, on a patch of bare ground where the wind had swept snow away, stood a small group of soldiers. Their horses shifted, heads down. The men wore coats the color of mud. Their rifles were slung casually, like tools. One soldier raised a hand as the delegation approached. "Halt," he called in English. Red Clay stepped forward, palms out in a gesture of peace. "We are here to speak with Agent Hollis." The soldier's eyes moved over them, lingering on Stone Who Listens, as if he could measure leadership by the set of shoulders. "State your business," Red Clay repeated. The soldier's mouth curled slightly. "Agent's expecting you?" he asked, as if the idea was amusing. Stone Who Listens said nothing. He looked at the soldier's face, young, shaved, cheeks red from cold, a man who had not yet learned how to carry shame. After a moment, the soldier jerked his chin toward the road. "You can pass, but no weapons." Blue Reed's hand tightened around her bundle. Stone Who Listens carried a knife at his belt, as any man did, but he did not touch it. He nodded once. "We have only what we always carry," Red Clay said carefully. The soldier stepped closer, eyes narrowing. He reached toward Stone Who Listens' belt. Stone Who Listens did not flinch. He kept his gaze steady. If he moved too fast, if he gave the soldier an excuse, blood could spill here, on this bare patch of ground. The soldier's fingers brushed the knife handle. He tugged it free, held it up like a trophy, then tossed it onto the ground. "There," he said. "Now you're peaceful." Stone Who Listens watched the knife land in the dirt. The insult was deliberate. He tasted it like bile, but he did not bend to pick it up. Blue Reed's eyes burned. Red Clay's lips pressed thin. Stone Who Listens continued walking. Behind him, he heard one of the soldiers chuckle. A small sound, but it followed them like a stone thrown at the back of the head. The agency building sat on a rise, surrounded by a rough fence. There was a main office, a storehouse, a stable, and a few cabins. A flag hung limp in the cold air. The place smelled of horses and smoke and something else. Flour, perhaps, or the ghost of flour, imagined by hungry minds. As they approached, a man stepped out of the office. Mr. Hollis. He wore a long coat and a hat pulled low. His boots were clean again. "Chief," he called, as if they were old friends. "I'm glad you came. It's about time we settled this." Red Clay translated, though Stone Who Listens understood enough of the English to catch the tone. Cheerful, controlling, as if the meeting belonged to him. Mr. Hollis gestured toward the office. "Come in. Warm yourselves." Inside, the office was heated by a stove. Papers were stacked on a desk. A map hung on the wall, lines and squares like a spider's web. There was a smell of ink and damp wool. Behind the desk sat another man, older, with a mustache and hard eyes. A military officer, judging by his posture. Mr. Hollis introduced him. "Captain Mercer." The captain did not stand. He looked at Stone, Who Listens, as one might look at a stray dog, evaluating whether it would bite. Stone Who Listens sat on a chair offered to him. Blue Reed remained standing for a moment, then sat too, her back straight. Red Clay took the seat closest to the desk, ready to translate. Mr. Hollis opened a folder and drew out a sheet of paper. He laid it flat, like a trap. "This," he said, tapping it with a finger, "is the agreement we discussed. The United States is prepared to recognize your people's right to reside on the reservation lands indicated here." He pointed to a square on the map. "In exchange, you will cease roaming and refrain from hunting outside the designated area. You will also refrain from interfering with settlers and railroad parties," Red Clay translated. Each phrase became heavier in their language. Cease roaming, refrain, interfering. Words like chains. Stone Who Listens asked, through Red Clay, "And the supplies?" Mr. Hollis smiled. "Of course. The government will provide rations through the winter. Flour, coffee, sugar, salt pork, as well as blankets. A blacksmith will be assigned. Tools for farming. We want you to prosper." Captain Mercer snorted softly, barely audible. Blue Reed's eyes flicked to him. She asked, through Red Clay, "When will the supplies arrive?" Mr. Hollis's smile tightened. "As soon as the treaty is signed. There are procedures." Stone Who Listens leaned forward slightly. "We are already in winter. Procedures do not fill bellies." Mr. Hollis's gaze hardened, though his voice remained polite. "Chief, you have to understand the government has responsibilities, logistics, orders. But the sooner you sign, the sooner we can help." Stone, who listens, looked at the paper. He could not read it, but he had learned enough to mistrust anything that looked too clean. "What of the river bends?" he asked. "What of the graves?" Mr. Hollis's patience thinned. "Those lands are open. The country is changing. You can't expect to hold on to every acre you once wandered." Wandered, as if their lives had been aimless. Stone, who listens, felt heat rise in him, not from the stove, but from insult. Blue Reed spoke quietly, not waiting for translation at first, her words sharp in their tongue. Red Clay hesitated, then translated carefully. "My brother asks about the dead. You say progress. Do you move your dead for progress?" Mr. Hollis's lips pressed together. Captain Mercer's eyes narrowed. "Ma'am," Mr. Hollis said, as if speaking to a difficult child, "this is not about sentiment. It's about reality. The alternative is conflict." Stone, who listens, held Mr. Hollis's gaze. "Is that a threat?" Mr. Hollis spread his hands. "It's a fact. There are settlers already moving into the area. If your young men attack them, there will be consequences. The army will respond." Captain Mercer finally spoke. His voice was flat. "And we will respond decisively," Red Clay translated. The words hung in the air like a rifle shot that hadn't yet happened. Stone, who listens, felt Blue Reed's tension beside him. He heard his own pulse. He thought of Raven Coyle and the young men who wanted to fight, their hearts full of fire, but their bodies still mortal. He thought of the women rationing food, the elders coughing at night, the children's thin laughter. He forced himself to speak slowly. "If we sign," he said, "we want the first rations delivered immediately, not after the ink dries and your procedures walk in circles. Immediately. To our camp." Mr. Hollis blinked, surprised by the demand. Then his expression became that of a man who had regained control by granting a small mercy. "I can authorize an initial issue," he said. "A wagon load, perhaps 2, as a gesture of goodwill." Stone, who listens, did not let relief show. "And the rest?" "Once you are relocated to the reservation site," Mr. Hollis replied. "That is where rations will be distributed. It's orderly." Orderly. The word made Stone, who listens, think of fences again. Blue Reed asked through Red Clay, "What if winter storms prevent travel?" Mr. Hollis shrugged. "Then you'll have to make do. That's why we want you settled near the agency." Stone, who listens, understood the shape of it now. They wanted the people close, contained, visible, easier to control, easier to starve if necessary. Captain Mercer leaned forward slightly. "Chief, you have a chance to avoid unnecessary suffering. Sign, and you'll be fed. Refuse, and you'll be treated as hostile. The choice is yours." The choice is yours. A phrase like a hand over your mouth. Stone, who listens, sat with the weight of that moment pressing down on his shoulders, heavier than any hide robe. He thought, "If I refuse, some will cheer. They will call me strong. Then winter will take the weak first, and the strong will bury them with empty hands. If I sign, some will spit at my feet. They will call me coward, but perhaps the children will live through the cold. Perhaps spring will come with another chance." He looked at Mr. Hollis's pen, resting on the desk like a small black bone. "Let us speak alone," Stone, who listened, said, meaning without the captain. He knew it was a long shot, but he wanted to see who truly held power here. Mr. Hollis hesitated. Captain Mercer's mouth tightened. "No," the captain said simply. "This is a federal matter." Stone, who listens, nodded once. That answer told him enough. He turned to Red Clay. "Read it," he said, though Red Clay could not truly read legal language well. But he could catch certain phrases, certain snares. Red Clay leaned over the paper, his eyes moving. His face grew paler with each line. "It says," Red Clay translated slowly, "we will cede all claims to the lands, except the reservation. It says the government may move us if it deems necessary." Stone, who listens' jaw tightened. "Move us," he repeated. Red Clay nodded. "It says the rations are at the discretion of the agent." Blue Reed's breath came sharp. "At his discretion?" she demanded. Mr. Hollis lifted his chin. "There has to be oversight. You can't have supplies misused." Stone, who listens, looked at him. "Misused by starving people." Captain Mercer's eyes were cold. "Enough." Stone, who listens, felt anger like a coal in his belly. But anger could not feed anyone. He asked Red Clay quietly in their tongue, "Is there any promise here that cannot be broken?" Red Clay's eyes met his. In them was fear and shame and something like resignation. "Paper is a river," Red Clay whispered back. "It flows where they want." Stone, who listens, sat back. The stove ticked as it cooled and heated. Outside somewhere, a horse stamped its hoof. Mr. Hollis tapped the paper again. "Chief, the snow is coming. You can be reasonable, or you can be stubborn. But winter doesn't care about pride." Stone, who listens, almost laughed at the irony. Winter didn't care, but these men did. They cared about land and control and the story they would tell themselves, that they offered help and were refused. Stone, who listens, spoke with a calm that cost him. "We will sign," he said. Blue Reed turned her head sharply toward him. Red Clay's shoulders sagged as if he had been holding up a roof. Mr. Hollis's face brightened in triumph disguised as relief. "Excellent. A wise decision." Captain Mercer's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. Mr. Hollis slid the paper toward Stone, who listens, and pushed the pen after it. "Here, sign with your mark." Stone, who listens, stared at the pen. He thought of how his people marked things, carving into wood, painting on hide, singing names into memory. A mark on paper felt like putting your spirit into a box someone else could lock. He took the pen anyway. His hand was steady. Not because he felt sure, but because he refused to show weakness to men who would use it. Red Clay guided him where to place the mark. Stone, who listens, made a simple sign, 2 lines crossing like a forked branch. Mr. Hollis sanded it, blew gently to dry it, then folded the paper carefully, as if it were sacred. "It's done," he said. Blue Reed's face was tight, her eyes bright with contained fury. Stone, who listens, did not look away. He wanted her to know he saw her anger and accepted it as part of his burden. Mr. Hollis stood. "We'll arrange for an initial ration wagon to leave tomorrow morning. You'll guide it to your camp. Then, within 2 weeks, you'll begin relocation to the reservation site." Stone, who listens, asked, 2 weeks. And if the river seals? If storms come?" Mr. Hollis shrugged, already bored of questions. "Then you'll have to make it work." Captain Mercer rose finally, towering in his uniform. "If your young men cause trouble in the meantime," he said, "I'll interpret it as a violation." Stone, who listens, met his gaze. "We want peace." Captain Mercer's laugh was silent, only a movement of breath. "Then be peaceful." They left the office with the paper no longer in Stone, who listens' hands. Outside, the cold bit their faces. The sky was a hard blue now. Snow glittered like shards. As they walked away from the agency, Blue Reed spoke low, in their tongue. "You gave them the river." Stone Who Listens did not deny it. "I gave them a story on paper," he said. "I kept our people breathing for now." Blue Reed's eyes were wet with anger. "For now," she repeated. Red Clay walked between them, silent. They reached the patch of bare ground where the soldiers waited. The same young soldier who had taken Stone Who Listens' knife watched them with curiosity. "Done?" he asked. Red Clay nodded. The soldier bent and picked up the knife from where it lay half buried in dirt. He held it out, handle first. Stone Who Listens took it. His fingers closed around it, feeling the familiar weight. The soldier smirked as if he had performed generosity. Stone Who Listens slid the knife back into his belt without a word. They walked on. As the ridge rose before them, the wind shifted. A thin line of clouds appeared in the west, low and gray. Snow was coming sooner than anyone wanted. Stone Who Listens felt a strange hollowness in his chest, as if part of him had been traded away. He reminded himself, a leader is not a man who keeps everything. A leader is a man who chooses what to lose so others may live. And yet, as they trudged toward home, he could not shake the feeling that he had placed his people on a path that narrowed into a corridor of fences. They returned to camp near dusk. Smoke rose. Children ran to meet them, eager for news like hungry birds. Raven Coil appeared from the edge of camp, his face wind-chapped, his eyes bright with expectation. "Well?" he demanded. Stone Who Listens looked at him, then at the children gathering behind Raven Coil, eyes wide. "We signed," Stone Who Listens said. Raven Coil's expression shifted, first shock, then fury. "You signed away the Bens," he hissed. "You signed away our father's bones." Murmurs rippled through the onlookers. Some faces tightened in approval of Raven Coil's anger. Some looked afraid. Stone Who Listens kept his voice level. "We signed for rations. For time." Raven Coil stepped closer. "Time to become prisoners." Blue Reed moved forward, her voice sharp. "Enough. Not here. Not in front of them." She nodded toward the children. Raven Coil's gaze flicked to the children, and for a heartbeat, his anger softened. Then it hardened again, turning inward. Old Elk emerged, leaning on his stick. He looked from face to face, reading the outcome as if it were written in smoke. "Come," he said. To the council lodge. Inside, the fire burned low. The leaders gathered again, the lodge filling with the scent of cold bodies warming. Stone Who Listens recounted the terms. He did not soften them. He spoke of the discretion clause. He spoke of relocation. He spoke of the captain's threat. Cottonmouth listened with her chin high, her eyes like flint. When Stone Who Listens finished, silence fell. Old Elk spoke slowly. "We have taken a rope they offer. We must see whether it is meant to pull us up or hang us." Raven Coil's voice was bitter. "We already know." Cottonmouth turned her gaze on Stone Who Listens. "And what do you believe?" Stone Who Listens stared into the fire again. He saw the flames eating wood, turning it into ash. "I believe," he said, choosing each word, "that they will not keep their promises unless it is easy for them. I believe the rations will come late or small. I believe they want us close, so they can count us, control us, and if necessary, let winter do their work." A shiver moved through the circle, not from cold. Blue Reed's voice was quiet. "Then why sign?" Stone Who Listens looked at her, then at Cottonmouth, Old Elk, Raven Coil. Because winter is also a weapon, he said, and right now it is pointed at our children. I will not let pride pull the trigger. Ravencoil's eyes filled with something that was almost tears. He blinked them away. You think flour will stop bullets, he muttered. Cottonmouth leaned forward. We do not place our lives in their hands, she said. If the supplies come, we take them. If they do not, we must have another plan. Old Elk nodded. We must prepare. Stone Who Listens felt the stone in his chest settle again, heavy but solid. Yes, he said. We prepare. Outside, the wind rose. It drove fine snow against the lodge walls, whispering like distant voices. The treaty winter had begun. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2. When Promises. Freeze. The first ration wagon arrived like a rumor, seen at a distance, doubted until the wheels ground close enough to throw up dirty snow. Children ran ahead of the adults, thin legs kicking, faces bright with a hope that made Stone Who Listens ache. Behind them came the women, slower, watching the wagon the way you watched a wounded animal, grateful for what it might provide, wary of what it might cost. The driver was a civilian with a red nose and eyes that slid away from direct gaze. Two soldiers rode alongside, their rifles upright, their breath rising in clouds. One of them was the young man who had taken Stone Who Listens' knife at the ridge. He sat tall in the saddle, as if he had grown since then. The wagon rolled to a stop near the council lodge. The horses stamped, tossing their heads, harness leather creaking. The driver hopped down and rubbed his hands together. Rations, he announced, too loudly. As promised. Red Clay translated, though most people understood the one word that mattered. Mr. Hollis did not come with the wagon. Instead, a clerk arrived, pale-faced, ink-stained fingers, a ledger tucked under one arm. He smiled with the practiced stiffness of a man who believed numbers were safer than people. Distribution will be supervised, the clerk said. Names, counts, orderly lines. Cottonmouth stepped forward. We have our own order, she said. The clerk's smile held, though his eyes tightened. Agent Hollis's instructions. Stone Who Listens watched the soldiers, watched the way their boots did not sink as deeply into snow as everyone else's moccasins, watched the way their hands rested casually near their rifle stocks, as if hunger itself might attack them. He forced himself to nod. We will receive what is offered. The wagon's sideboards came down. Sacks appeared. Flour, some coffee, a few small barrels that smelled of salt and grease. Not enough. Stone Who Listens could see that in a glance. Not enough for the number of mouths in the camp, not for the length of winter still waiting beyond the hills. Blue Reed stood beside him, her face unreadable. A gesture, she murmured in their tongue. Not a lifeline. Cottonmouth directed the women. They moved with quiet efficiency, forming lines that did not need a clerk's shouting. Names were spoken softly, bundles handed out, ration sizes cut down immediately, because Cottonmouth was already thinking about the week after next, about the week after that. A boy of maybe 10 held a small sack of flour as if it were a baby. His hands shook. He looked up at Stone, Who Listens with a gratitude that felt like a blade. Stone Who Listens looked away first. That night the camp smelled faintly of cooked flour and coffee. Children's bellies filled enough to make them drowsy. Some elders' coughs eased. For a few hours the lodge fires burned brighter, and the stories told near them had a little more breath. But when the fires died down, fear came back, like cold creeping under the lodge flaps. Stone Who Listens sat with Old Elk and Cottonmouth in the council lodge, watching the last flames lick at the wood. "It is less than he promised," Cottonmouth said, her voice flat. Old Elk's pale eyes reflected the firelight. "Promises are cheap. Flour is expensive." Stone Who Listens looked at the small pile of remaining sacks. "He said more would come when we move." Cottonmouth's mouth tightened. "And he said the first rations would come immediately. Yet they came with soldiers." Old Elk leaned forward slightly. "The rope," he said. "We hold it now. It tightens when we pull." Stone Who Listens heard it too, the tightening of something invisible. Not around his wrists, not yet, but around the future. Outside, winter deepened. The river sealed. The wind sharpened. The buffalo, what remained of them, kept their distance from the roads and the fences, as if they too understood where death traveled. And then the second wagon did not come. A week passed, then another. Men went out hunting and returned with little: rabbits caught in snares, a skinny deer that took too many arrows because it refused to die quickly. Once, a party found a buffalo carcass, already stripped, ribs gleaming like a white ladder in the snow. Ravens watched them claim what scraps were left, black eyes unblinking. At night, children cried in their sleep. Red Clay walked the edge of camp, restless. He had begun to speak more often in English, as if saying their words could summon the wagons, as if pronouncing the government's language correctly might make it honest. Blue Reed's patience thinned. "Stop praying to their tongue," she snapped one evening when Red Clay said for the third time, "It must be a delay. Logistics." Red Clay's face flushed. "You think I don't know?" he hissed. "You think I haven't seen how they turn must into maybe, and maybe into never?" Stone Who Listens stepped between them. "Enough," he said softly. They both fell silent, breathing hard, like two dogs who had almost fought and now did not know what to do with their teeth. The third week, a messenger arrived from the agency, alone, on horseback, carrying no sacks, only a folded paper and a mouth full of warnings. He introduced himself as a corporal. His cheeks were hollow, his eyes alert. He handed the paper to Red Clay. Red Clay read, lips moving. His face changed, like a man watching a door close from the wrong side. "They say," Red Clay translated slowly, "the next issue will be at the agency. Not here. They say we must begin relocation to receive it. And," he swallowed, "they say hunting outside the designated area will be considered hostile activity." Raven Coyle, who had been listening near the doorway, let out a sound like a growl. "They starve us, then call us hostile for refusing to die politely." The corporal stiffened. "Those are the orders," he said, as if orders were weather. Stone Who Listens kept his voice calm. "Why the change?" The corporal's eyes flicked away. "Supplies are limited. The agent can't send wagons into every camp. It has to be centralized." Centralized. Another word, like a fence post driven into the ground. Blue Reed stepped closer to the corporal. "And if the old ones cannot travel? If the children freeze on the road?" The corporal's mouth tightened. For a heartbeat, something human surfaced in him. Then it sank again beneath uniform and duty. "Then you should have moved sooner," he said. Raven Coyle surged forward. Stone Who Listens caught his arm, holding him back with a grip that hurt. "Go," Stone Who Listens told the corporal. In English he shaped carefully. "Tell Hollis we heard him." The corporal nodded quickly and mounted, leaving the camp with his horse's hooves punching neat holes into snow. When he was gone, the lodge filled with voices. Anger rising, fear rising, accusation rising. Ravencoil tore free of Stone Who Listens' grip. "This is what you signed," he said, his voice shaking. "A slow killing." Stone Who Listens did not deny it. Denial was for men who still believed they controlled the world. Cottonmouth's voice cut through the shouting. "We speak as if hunger will wait," she said. "It will not." Old Elk lifted his walking stick and tapped it once on the earth. The sound was small, but it brought the room to attention. "We have 3 paths," he said. "We go to the agency for rations. We stay and hunt, and they call us hostile. Or we fight, and they kill us faster." Ravencoil's eyes burned. Faster is better than crawling. Blue Reed's voice was quiet, and because it was quiet, everyone heard it. "Is it?" she asked. "Tell the mothers that. Tell the children." Ravencoil looked away, jaw clenched, shame flickering like a weak flame in wind. Stone Who Listens waited until the noise settled, then spoke. "We go," he said. "Not all at once. We move the camp in groups. The elders and children first, with the strongest escorts. We keep hunters out ahead. We do not surrender our knives again. If they demand that, we turn back." Ravencoil laughed bitterly. "Turn back to what?" Stone Who Listens met his gaze. "To dying on our feet, not on our knees." The words surprised even him, because they were more steel than he usually allowed himself. But winter had sharpened him. Plans formed quickly because hunger made decision-making simple. Lodges were taken down, poles bundled, possessions reduced to what could be carried. Sacred items were wrapped carefully, too carefully, as if extra layers of hide could keep them safe from the kind of theft that did not require hands. Blue Reed and Cottonmouth organized the women and children. Old Elk chose which elders rode on the few horses they had. Red Clay worked with Stone Who Listens to set the route, avoiding the ridges where soldiers watched. Ravencoil gathered young men who wanted to fight and gave them a different task: scouting, hunting, keeping distance behind the main group like a shadow. "It is still war," Ravencoil told them, bitter. "Just one they don't call a war." The first day of travel, the sky stayed clear. The snow squeaked underfoot. Breath froze on scarves and hair. Children were carried when their legs gave out. Some elders rode hunched and silent, their eyes fixed on a horizon that did not care about age. By the second day, the wind rose, pushing hard from the northwest. It drove needles of snow into faces. A woman stumbled and fell, and when someone lifted her, her hands were already bluish at the fingertips. Stone Who Listens walked at the front, feeling the land under his feet as if he could coax it into kindness. He could not. At night, they camped in a shallow draw where the wind was less cruel. Fires were small to save wood. People huddled close. Cottonmouth counted what food remained, her lips moving silently. Stone Who Listens lay awake listening to the children's breathing, listening for coughs turning wet, listening for the sound of an elder's breath stopping. In the dark, Blue Reed crawled to his side. "Do you remember the stories Father told of the hunger winters?" she whispered. Stone Who Listens nodded. Those stories had always been warnings from the past, myths with sharp edges. Now they felt like instructions. Blue Reed's voice trembled. He said hunger makes animals of men. Stone Who Listens stared at the black sky above them, where stars hid behind thin cloud. "Then we must choose to stay human," he whispered back. On the fourth day, they saw smoke on a distant ridge. Soldiers. Not close enough to shoot, close enough to watch. Raven Coil's scouts returned with news. "They are moving with us," one young man said, eyes wide. "Like wolves." Red Clay's face was tight. "They want us to go where they want," he muttered. "And if we don't?" Stone, who listens, finished the thought. "Then they will respond decisively." By the time the agency buildings came into view, the group's pace had slowed. Feet dragged, shoulders sagged. The smell of sickness hovered in the air, faint but unmistakable. The agency fence looked taller than before. At the gate, soldiers waited. Captain Mercer stood among them, as if he had known exactly when they would arrive. Behind him, a few civilians watched. Traders, clerks, men with curious eyes and full cheeks. Mr. Hollis emerged from the office, his coat buttoned neatly, his face composed. "Well," he said, loudly enough for everyone to hear. "This is sensible. Welcome. We'll get you fed," Red Clay translated. The words landed oddly. Welcome, as if they had arrived by invitation, not coercion. Stone, who listens, stepped forward. His legs ached. His throat was raw from cold air. "We came for rations," he said. Mr. Hollis nodded briskly. "Of course. First, we'll register you, then distribution. Then we'll discuss your relocation site. The sooner we get you settled, the better." Captain Mercer's eyes swept over the people behind Stone, who listens. The children, the elders, the women whose cheeks were hollow. His gaze lingered on Raven Coil and the young men at the edges, and his hand rested on his pistol, as if by habit. "Any trouble?" Mercer said, not bothering to lower his voice. "And I'll telegraph for reinforcements. General Crook is in the territory. He won't tolerate—" Stone, who listens, heard the name like a distant drum. Crook, a man whose shadow fell across many valleys, even where he did not stand. Raven Coil's lips pulled back slightly, showing teeth. Stone, who listens, glanced at him. A warning. Not now. Not here. Surrounded by fences and guns and hungry children. Mr. Hollis clapped his hands. "All right, line up. Families first. We'll do this orderly." Orderly again. The lines formed. People held out hands and ration tickets the clerk had prepared. Flour sacks were handed over, smaller than the first time, smaller than promised. Some coffee. Salt. No blankets. Cottonmouth spoke sharply to the clerk when she saw the allotments. Red Clay translated, his voice strained. "This is not what you agreed," Cottonmouth said. "This is not enough." The clerk shrugged, eyes fixed on his ledger. "Supplies are short." Blue Reed stepped forward. "Then we will die short," she said. Mr. Hollis's smile flickered. Now, you're here. You're being provided for. You should be grateful." Grateful. The word struck Stone, who listens like a slap. He inhaled slowly, holding back the heat that rose in his chest. "We will take what you give," he said, voice steady. "But we will not pretend it is kindness." Mr. Hollis's eyes hardened. "Chief," he said quietly, "mind your tone." Captain Mercer shifted slightly, a signal to the soldiers nearby. Rifles adjusted. Boots scraped. Stone, who listens, felt the camp behind him tense. Hunger turning to anger. Anger searching for a spark. And somewhere beyond the agency fence, beyond the smoke and the ledger books, he imagined another camp, another circle of fires, people who had refused paper and refused fences. He had heard their name whispered on the plains like a prayer and like a warning. Sitting Bull. Stone, who listens, did not know if he believed in heroes, but he believed in consequences. He believed in winter. He believed in how quickly a line could become a battlefield. He looked at Mr. Hollis, then at Captain Mercer, then at the people behind him. "We will move to the site," he said at last, "because saying no here would mean bullets. But we will move in our own time. We bury our dead first. We care for our sick first." Mr. Hollis's mouth tightened. 2 days, he said. "Then you depart for the reservation. That is my final offer." Stone, who listens, understood. It was not an offer. It was a countdown. That night they camped just outside the agency fence, in a strip of ground that belonged to no one except the wind. The ration sacks sat in the snow like pale stones. Children licked flour off their fingers. Elders stared at the fence as if it might speak. Raven Coyle sat near a small fire with his young men. Their voices were low, dangerous. Red Clay came to Stone, who listens, eyes haunted. "I saw the telegraph wire," he whispered. "It runs straight into the office. They can call soldiers like calling rain." Stone, who listens, nodded. "Then we must move like smoke," he said. Blue Reed joined them, carrying a wrapped bundle, one of the sacred objects, hidden beneath ordinary cloth. She held it as if it were a beating heart. "They will want more than land," she said quietly. "They will want what makes us us." Stone, who listens, looked at the bundle. He thought of the paper treaty folded neatly in Hollis's desk. He thought of the ledger of names. He thought of the fence. He realized then what the treaty had truly been. Not an agreement, but a method, one of many, to turn living people into manageable quantities. In the distance, a wolf howled. Another answered, their voices braided together in the dark, not as a song of surrender, but as a declaration that hunger did not erase existence. Stone, who listens, listened until the howls faded. 2 days, Hollis had said. 2 days until the next narrowing of the corridor. End of Chapter 2. Chapter 3. The Capsule of Memory. The second night outside the agency fence was colder than the first, as if the wind had listened to Hollis's countdown and decided to help him. Stone, who listens, walked the edge of their temporary camp, where snow had been packed flat by tired feet. Beyond, the agency buildings sat behind rails and posts like a small fort made of paperwork and confidence. Lantern light moved in windows. Somewhere a horse snorted. Somewhere a man laughed. Inside the circle of their people, the fires were smaller now, not only for lack of wood, but because too much flame felt like an invitation. Children huddled under patched blankets. Elders lay with eyes open, staring at darkness. The flour sacks were stacked near Cottonmouth, guarded like sacred things. Hunger had turned them into objects of power. Stone, who listens, found Raven Coyle near a weak fire at the far side of camp. The young men gathered around him were not boys anymore. Their faces were gaunt, their cheekbones sharp, their eyes too bright. They spoke in low voices, their words clipped, moving with the nervous rhythm of men who had decided something dangerous. Raven Coyle looked up when Stone, who listens, approached. His expression held respect and resentment braided together like rawhide. "You came to tell me not to do it," Raven Coyle said. Stone, who listens, sat down across from him, close enough that his breath fogged between them. "I came to hear it from your mouth, not from the wind." Raven Coyle's jaw worked. "We're leaving tonight," he said. "Some of us. Not the children. Not the old ones." He glanced toward the agency fence. "We'll go north. There are camps beyond their lines. People who refuse their paper." Stone Who Listens did not ask who. The name lived in the air already. "You mean Sitting Bull," he said. The young men shifted at the sound of it. The name was not just a person. It was an idea that moved faster than horses. A refusal. A promise of dignity that did not fit inside Hollis's ledger. Raven Coil's eyes flashed. "I mean a place where we are not counted like cattle." Stone Who Listens held his gaze. "And how will you get there?" Raven Coil leaned in. "We know the ground. We've watched the patrols. Mercer keeps men at the gate and 2 by the stable. But there's a low place in the fence to the east where the posts are loose. We can slip through the timber line before dawn." Stone Who Listens heard the plan's shape. Quick, sharp, hopeful. The kind of plan young men made when they still believed speed could outrun consequence. "And then?" Stone Who Listens asked. Raven Coil's mouth tightened. "Then we fight." A crackle in the fire punctuated the words. Stone Who Listens thought of rifles, thought of how Captain Mercer's soldiers adjusted their weapons the moment a voice rose, thought of the telegraph wire Red Clay had pointed out, thin as a vein, carrying orders like blood. He spoke slowly. "If you leave, Mercer will call it a violation. Hollis will say the treaty is broken, and then they'll punish us anyway." Raven Coil interrupted, anger rising. "We have already obeyed, and they still starve us. We have already walked to their fence, and they still call us hostile. What is left but fighting?" The question was honest. That made it dangerous. Stone Who Listens looked at the young men's faces. He could see his own youth in them, and he could see the graves that waited for youth when it mistook fury for a shield. "There is also saving," he said. Raven Coil laughed, bitter and soft. "Saving is what you say when you're afraid to strike." Stone Who Listens felt the coal of anger stir. He did not feed it. Saving is what you do when you understand what they really want. Raven Coil's eyes narrowed. "They want land." "They want land," Stone Who Listens agreed. "And they want time. They want us to stop being a people. They want our children to forget our words. They want us alive only if we are smaller every year." Raven Coil's mouth opened, then closed. The firelight made his eyes shine wet for a heartbeat. Stone Who Listens leaned closer. "If you fight, you may kill some of them. You may even win a day. But they will come back with more men than there are trees, and they will call it justice." Raven Coil looked away, jaw clenched so hard the muscles jumped. Stone Who Listens let silence do some work. At last, Raven Coil said, quieter, "So what do you want? For us to kneel?" Stone Who Listens shook his head. "I want you to live long enough to tell the story." One of the young men, an older cousin of Raven Coil's, with a scar across his chin, snorted. "Stories don't stop bullets." "No," Stone Who Listens said. "But stories are how a people survives bullets." Raven Coil's gaze returned. "We're leaving anyway," he said, stubborn as a young tree. "With or without your blessing?" Stone Who Listens nodded once. "Then hear this. Do not take more than you need. Do not take food from the children. And if the soldiers follow you, lead them away from us." Raven Coil's eyes widened slightly. He had expected a command, a threat, a prohibition. Instead, Stone Who Listens gave him a condition like a father giving a son a knife. Not permission, but responsibility. Raven Coil swallowed. "And you?" he asked, voice rough. Stone Who Listens stared into the fire until the flames blurred. "I will do what a leader must," he said. He stood, leaving Raven Coil and his young men to the darkness and their decision. Near midnight, Red Clay found Stone Who Listens beside Cottonmouth's pile of flour sacks. The interpreter's face looked carved from worry. "They're planning to leave," Red Clay whispered. "I know," Stone Who Listens said. Red Clay's hands twitched as if he wanted to hold something. "Mercer's men are restless," he whispered. "I heard them talking at the fence. They think we'll run." They want an excuse. Stone Who Listens' eyes went to the agency office window. A lantern burned inside. A silhouette crossed it. Hollis, perhaps, or a clerk. Paper moving, ink becoming orders. "What did you hear?" Stone Who Listens asked. Red Clay hesitated. "I heard the word arrest." He swallowed. "If any of the young men leave, Mercer wants to take hostages, so the rest of us stay." Hostages. A new kind of fence, built from human bodies. Stone Who Listens felt the stone in his chest shift, becoming something sharper. He looked toward Old Elk's resting place. The elder lay under a robe, his breathing shallow but steady. Old Elk had survived too many winters to be surprised by cruelty, but even he might not survive Mercer's order. Stone Who Listens turned to Blue Reed, who sat nearby with the wrapped sacred bundle in her lap, her fingers tracing its edge as if counting heartbeats. "Wake Old Elk," Stone Who Listens said softly, and Cottonmouth, quietly. Blue Reed's eyes widened. "Now?" "Yes." Red Clay's voice trembled. "What are you planning?" Stone Who Listens did not answer right away. He listened, really listened. In the distance beyond the fence, boots scraped. A horse shifted. Somewhere a door opened and closed. He said at last, "We leave first." Red Clay stared. "But Hollis said 2 days." "Hollis is not winter," Stone Who Listens said, "and he is not our father." Blue Reed's mouth tightened in grim understanding. "You're taking them away," she whispered, "before Mercer can take them." Stone Who Listens nodded. "The children, the sick, as many as we can move quietly." "And the rations?" Red Clay asked. Stone Who Listens' gaze went to the flour sacks. A bitter truth sat between them. If they left them, they would starve sooner. If they took them, Mercer would call it theft and hunt them harder. Cottonmouth, half awake now, spoke without softness. "We take some," she said. "We leave some. So they cannot say we stole everything. And so those who cannot move quickly." Her eyes flicked toward the elders, who might not make the pace. "Have something, if they are forced to stay." Stone Who Listens felt the brutal arithmetic of leadership. Who moves, who stays, who becomes bait without choosing it. He looked at Blue Reed. "Can you carry the bundle?" She lifted it slightly. "I can carry more," she said. Old Elk was awake now, his pale eyes clear even in exhaustion. He understood without much explanation. They tightened the rope, Old Elk murmured. Stone Who Listens crouched beside him. "Yes." Old Elk's voice was steady. "Then do not let it touch the children's necks." Stone Who Listens nodded. The plan formed in whispers. There would be 2 movements in the dark. Raven Coil and his young men would slip out through the low place in the fence and draw any pursuit north and west, away from the river bends and away from the women and children. Stone Who Listens would lead the vulnerable east toward a cut in the land where cottonwoods grew thick and the river braided itself into channels too shallow for wagons. From there, if they survived the night and the next day, they could angle north, toward rumor, toward distance, toward any place that did not require Hollis's discretion to breathe. Blue Reed would carry the sacred bundle. Cottonmouth would ration the flour in motion. Red Clay would guide them around patrol patterns he had learned by listening to soldiers who spoke as if no one could understand them. And before they moved, Stone Who Listens would do something he had been delaying, hoping he would never have to do. He would hide a part of them where paper could not reach. They moved like smoke, quiet, low, careful. Mothers lifted children without waking them fully. A baby began to cry once, a thin, startled wail, and a hand covered its mouth gently, not to silence life, but to protect it. The baby's eyes widened in the dark, then blinked, trusting. Snow muffled footsteps. The only loud sounds were inside Stone Who Listens' chest. At the eastern side of the agency grounds, the fence sagged where the earth dipped. A few posts leaned at an angle, not repaired, because the agency had never believed anyone would leave when food was the only leash. Raven Coil waited there, his young men clustered behind him. He held his breath when he saw Stone Who Listens arrive with the first group of children and elders. For a moment they looked at each other, leader and would-be war leader, two paths splitting from the same hunger. Raven Coil's voice was a whisper. "You're going too." Stone Who Listens nodded. "Not the way you think." Raven Coil's eyes flicked over the children. His face tightened. "Mercer will chase you," he whispered. "Then make him chase you instead," Stone Who Listens said. Raven Coil's jaw worked. "You're using us as bait." Stone Who Listens did not lie. "I am asking you to carry danger away from them." Raven Coil's throat bobbed. A young man behind him muttered, "This is what soldiers do." Stone Who Listens met Raven Coil's gaze. "This is what protectors do," he said. Raven Coil's eyes shone with something that might have been hatred or love or both. He nodded once, sharply, as if cutting something loose inside himself. "We leave now," Raven Coil whispered to his men. Then to Stone Who Listens, "If we reach the northern camps, if we find them," he swallowed, "if Sitting Bull's people are there, I will tell them you did not kneel." Stone Who Listens held his gaze. "Tell them we did not vanish," he said. Raven Coil slipped through the low fence with his men and disappeared into the timber line like a thrown shadow. Stone Who Listens gestured, and Blue Reed guided the children through next, followed by elders and the sick. Red Clay moved last, scanning the dark. A dog barked somewhere inside the agency. Another answered. Then a soldier's voice, faint. "What was that?" Stone Who Listens felt time tighten. "Move," he whispered. They hurried into the trees. They traveled without fire until dawn, following the river's braided channels where the ground dipped and rose unpredictably. Horses could not easily follow here, wagons could not. Men on foot could, but not fast. As the sky began to pale, Stone Who Listens led them into a thick stand of cottonwoods. The trunks rose like pillars, their bark pale in the half-light. Dead leaves rattled softly, trapped in branches. Here at last, he stopped. Blue Reed's face was rimed with frost. Cottonmouth's lips were cracked. Children blinked, waking into confusion. "We rest," Stone Who Listens said, voice low. Quietly. Red Clay crouched near him. "They will notice soon," he whispered. Stone Who Listens nodded. "Yes." Old Elk shifted under his robe. "If they come," he murmured, "do not let them take the bundle." Blue Reed tightened her grip around it. Stone Who Listens looked at the land. The river bent here in a wide curve, the ice thinner near the moving channels. A small rise of earth stood beneath the largest cottonwood, its roots twisting the ground, as if trying to hold on to it. "This," Stone Who Listens said, more to himself than to others, "is where we leave something." Blue Reed's eyes narrowed. "Now?" He nodded. He motioned Red Clay and Blue Reed to follow him. Cottonmouth came too, carrying a small sack of flour and a short-handled digging tool. They moved away from the cluster of resting people, out of earshot of children. At the base of the cottonwood, Stone Who Listens knelt. The earth was hard with frost. Cottonmouth struck it with the tool, chipping away at the surface. The sound was small, but each strike felt loud in Stone Who Listens' nerves. Red Clay watched, confused. "What is this?" he whispered. Stone Who Listens did not look up. "Insurance," he said. A message to spring. Blue Reed unwrapped the sacred bundle just enough to reveal what lay inside. A small carved object, smoothed by touch, a strip of hide painted with symbols, a twist of braided hair bound with sinew, kept from a loved one long gone, and a tiny pouch of seeds saved from the last harvest near the river bends, carried like a promise. Not everything. Never everything. But enough to say, we were here, and we knew who we were. Stone Who Listens took the strip of painted hide and pressed it to his forehead briefly. He spoke a few words in their language, quiet, not ceremony for an audience, but for the land itself. A request. A vow. Then he placed the items carefully into a hide wrapping, sealed it with resin, and lowered it into the shallow hole Cottonmouth had made. Blue Reed added something of her own. A small reed flute, cracked near the mouthpiece, repaired with sinew. "For the children who will come back," she whispered. Stone Who Listens covered the bundle with earth, pressing it down with his palms until the ground looked undisturbed, just another patch of winter's hard skin. Red Clay stared, eyes wet. "They can still find it," he whispered. Stone Who Listens shook his head. "Not with paper. Not with maps." He looked toward the river bend, memorizing the angle of branches, the shape of roots. "Only with memory." Cottonmouth stood, wincing. "And if none of us lives to remember?" Stone Who Listens' throat tightened. He forced himself to answer. "Then the land will remember," he said. "And maybe someone will listen." The first rifle crack came late morning. It echoed through the trees like a snapped bone. People bolted upright. Children cried. Mothers pulled them close, eyes wide. A second crack followed, then shouting, English, sharp and urgent. "They found the fence," Red Clay said, breathless, returning from a quick look through the timber. "They're searching. Mercer's men. And—" He swallowed. "More. They came fast. They must have used the telegraph." Stone Who Listens felt the name Crook again, distant but present, like a thunderhead you couldn't see yet. He stood. "We keep moving," he said. "No fires. No straight lines. We split into two groups again." Cottonmouth's eyes narrowed. "They will catch the slower." Stone Who Listens looked at the elders, looked at Old Elk, looked at the children. Old Elk met his gaze calmly. "Do not look at me like a man already dead," the elder said. Stone Who Listens swallowed. "Walk," he said simply. They moved, stumbling through drifts, using the river's channels as cover, crossing ice where it seemed thick enough, avoiding open ground. Behind them, shouts drew closer. A soldier appeared between trees, young, pale, rifle raised. He froze when he saw the children, as if the sight did not fit the story he had been told. Then Captain Mercer's voice barked from behind him, and the soldier's hesitation vanished. Stone Who Listens raised his hands slightly, palms out. "We are moving to the site," he called in English, "as Hollis ordered." Mercer stepped into view, eyes cold. "You're running," he snapped. "You're violating federal orders." Red Clay whispered, "Don't." Stone Who Listens spoke louder, steady. "We are keeping our sick alive, that is all." Mercer's gaze swept the group. It landed on Blue Reed's bundle. His eyes narrowed. "What's that?" he demanded. Blue Reed tightened her grip. "Clothes," she said in English, her pronunciation sharp. Mercer took a step forward. "Open it." Stone Who Listens felt the moment tilt. This was not about cloth. This was about ownership, their right to keep anything that was not counted, not inventoried. "No," Stone Who Listens said. Mercer's lips curled. "Then you are hiding contraband." Contraband. As if a people's spirit could be illegal. Mercer raised his hand slightly. Soldiers behind him leveled rifles. Children began to sob. Stone Who Listens saw it clearly then. They could not outrun this with bodies. Only with choices. He turned his head slightly, barely moving his lips. "Blue Reed," he murmured in their tongue. "Take the children. Go. Now. Follow the channel. Do not stop." Blue Reed's eyes widened. "And you?" Stone Who Listens did not answer her. He looked at Cottonmouth. "Go with them," he said softly. Cottonmouth's jaw tightened. "You're staying." Stone Who Listens nodded once. Old Elk, leaning on his stick, stepped forward as if to stand beside him. Stone Who Listens lifted a hand, stopping him. "Not you," he said. Old Elk's eyes flashed. "I have lived long enough to choose how I stand." Stone Who Listens held his gaze, then let him step up. Red Clay hesitated, torn between survival and loyalty. Stone Who Listens touched his arm. "Guide them," he said. Red Clay swallowed and nodded, eyes shining with shame. Blue Reed turned, her face carved from grief and fury. She pulled the children forward. Mothers followed, clutching bundles, moving quickly through the channel's low ground. Cottonmouth went with them, pushing people onward with fierce murmurs. Mercer's attention snapped toward the moving group. "Stop them!" he barked. Two soldiers lunged to pursue. Stone Who Listens stepped into their path. Mercer's eyes narrowed. "Move aside." Stone Who Listens stood still. "They are unarmed," he said. "They are children." Mercer's voice was flat. "So were the settlers you interfered with." He nodded once to a soldier. "Take him." A hand grabbed Stone Who Listens' arm. He did not resist at first. Resistance would become justification. Old Elk lifted his walking stick and struck the soldier's wrist hard. The soldier yelped, loosening his grip. Mercer's face hardened. "Enough!" A rifle fired, too close, too loud. A puff of snow jumped near Old Elk's feet. A warning shot. Children screamed farther away. Stone Who Listens felt something inside him go very still. He looked Mercer in the eyes. "You promised rations," he said, voice quiet. "You promised protection. You promised peace." Mercer's expression did not change. "I promise order." Stone Who Listens understood. Hollis's pen and Mercer's rifle were the same instrument held differently. He took a step backward, drawing Mercer's focus, keeping the pursuit tangled. Old Elk stood beside him, breathing hard, but upright. "Go," Stone Who Listens whispered. Not to his people now, but to time itself. "Go, before the door closes." Mercer raised his pistol. Stone Who Listens did not flinch. He thought of the cottonwood roots. He thought of the bundle buried beneath them. He thought of children's laughter that might return one day to the river bends. even if it returned wearing different clothes. A shot cracked. Pain bloomed in Stone Who Listens' side like hot iron. He staggered but stayed standing. Another shot, and the world tilted. Snow rushed up to meet him. He fell to his knees. The cold was immediate, sharp, honest, more honest than paper. Old Elk dropped beside him, not struck, just lowering himself as if sitting at the end of a story. His hand found Stone Who Listens' shoulder. "Listen," Old Elk murmured. Stone Who Listens' breath came in ragged clouds. He listened, past Mercer's shouted orders, past soldiers' boots, past his own blood, until he heard what Old Elk meant. Farther away, beyond the shouts, beyond the fence and the telegraph wire, a howl rose. Wolves, or perhaps only the wind playing at being wolves. But to Stone Who Listens, it sounded like an answer. Mercer stood over them, pistol still in hand. His face was tight, not triumphant. Even he could feel, perhaps, that something had slipped beyond his reach. Stone Who Listens forced his eyes to stay open a moment longer. He searched the trees for Blue Reed. He saw her only briefly, a movement, a flash of dark braid, a mother's arm lifting a child over a drift. Then she was gone into the cottonwoods, swallowed by the land. Stone Who Listens exhaled, and with that breath he let go of the part of him that had tried to bargain with winter. Old Elk's voice was close, almost tender. "We are not paper," he whispered. Stone Who Listens tried to answer. His mouth formed no sound. But inside, something answered anyway. A quiet, stubborn yes. His eyes closed. They would write reports after. Hollis would make notes. Mercer would telegraph words like escape, hostile, necessary. The clerk would tally the sacks of flour left behind, the names counted, the names missing. A story would be produced that fit in offices and newspapers. But another story moved through the plains, carried not by wire but by breath. Blue Reed led the children and the sick through the braided channels until the soldiers' shouts faded. Red Clay guided them by the lay of the land, his English useful only as a weapon he refused to hand over. Cottonmouth kept them alive on rationed flour and stubbornness, her jaw set like stone. They traveled north and east, avoiding roads, avoiding open ridges. They moved at night when the moon allowed it, and hid by day in draws and timber. More than once they heard distant gunfire. More than once they saw smoke on the horizon. They did not stop. Somewhere along the way, they met a small party of riders, Lakota men with faces carved by wind, eyes measuring. They did not smile. They asked few questions. When Blue Reed spoke their language and named her people, the riders' posture shifted. Recognition, not warmth, but something like shared gravity. One of them said simply, "There are camps farther north." He did not say the famous name out loud. He did not need to. Blue Reed nodded, holding the cracked reed flute close to her chest, feeling it as a promise that sound could return. In the years that followed, winter would take more than it should have. Soldiers would take more. Papers would be signed and broken and signed again. Children would be given new names. Languages would be punished. The river bends would be fenced, measured, sold. But under one cottonwood, near a bend where the ice ran thin and the roots twisted like fingers clinging to earth, a small bundle waited. A capsule of memory. Seeds, symbols, hair, and a flute, hidden not to preserve the past untouched, but to make the future possible. And one spring, whether soon or long after, the river would loosen its grip. The cottonwood would bud. The earth would soften. Someone would come looking. Not with a map, with a story. End of Chapter 3.